One of my first recommendations to parents or caregivers who want to raise kids to be wise about food, body, and self is to ideally be someone who is not on a diet or restricting food unless medically necessary. If you are um on a medical journey, try to keep it out of your child's consciousness as much as possible, and know that this is nearly impossible once they get to about 7 years old. Restrictive is eating is not as sustainable for most humans. It creates foods that are charged or bad and more attractive than they need to be. If you want your child to develop healthy, giving, balanced eating habits, you'll ideally practice moderate eating yourself. If you're a chaotic eater who goes back and forth between restricting and eating frenetically or compulsively, your children will likely imitate these as they learn how to regulate their own eating and appetites. Trust me, they're watching. I have supported people with disordered eating for the past more than 5 years of my practice. Many adult clients I work with who struggle with compulsive eating have either imitated dieting parents or were put on a diet at a young age by a well meaning caregiver or medical professional. As I mentioned, several studies have shown that dieting in childhood and adolescence is the most significant risk factor for struggling with one's weight as an adult. I have had many clients with my nutritional therapy practice describe parents caught up in the vicious cycle of restricting and yo-yo weight gain. Uh, this made it genuinely confusing for them to learn how to eat in a balanced, sustainable way based on their body cues versus the food plan of the day. If you're starting to worry about your own eating habits and the influence that they might have on the children around you, trust me, you're not alone. Sadly, like we see in research indicating that out of 5 American women are dissatisfied with how they look, with the have on a restrictive diet. Like there's one study that mentioned that 80% of 10-year-old girls had dieted in their short life. This statistic is frankly shocking, and I hope that things are shifting as our awareness of eating problem increases. Going on a restrictive diet is a predictor of increased body weight, particularly if you went on a diet during your childhood or teen years. The risk of disordered eating and a long term struggle with your body, however, is more concerning. So instead of developing self esteem based on your unique strengths, dieting encourages an unhealthy preoccupation with the body and its shape during formative years of years of growth, those formative years, definitely. So what I normally tell my clients is that I don't do weight loss counseling because I feel it's unethical. There's no evidence-based food plan that leads to sustainable weight loss. There's absolutely none. Furthermore, focusing on weight would reduce the person in front of me to a body and miss what I firmly believe, which are the true determinants of health and well-being. So, such as social support, economic support, access to good preventive and acute health care, management of life stress, health promoting behaviors, of course, those that are related to food, sleep, and physical activity. What I normally do is I strive to empower people of all ages to look beyond the size of their bodies and nourish the person within with a focus on whole self wellness. I know it's hard to live in a culture that does not celebrate body diversity. Sometimes it can be very challenging as a parent not to have anxiety about your child's weight if they don't fall into the socially acceptable range. No one wants their kids to be persecuted and teased because of their bodies. Yet the way to prevent this is not to prescribe dieting or encourage weight loss. This can confuse the child, trust me. Sometimes, as their parents seem to be rejecting their body too, because that is what they get to see every day. Encourage. So in this case, I advise that you encourage your child or teen to diet that can set them up. If you're encouraging your child to diet or your teen, this can set them up for a lifetime battle with their body and food. So what I normally do, I ask people to, or my clients, to look back at old pictures and wish they could have the body they once thought was too chubby or too big. Often the child or preteen weight gain that was once feared was a growth spurt that would have an evened out if left well enough alone. Actually, often it's genetically natural body change that becomes problematic in terms of health or comfort only when the management of it starts by dieting or abusing exercise. I can't stress this enough. Instead of prescribing a diet or weight loss strategy for your child, I encourage something that may be harder but gives the child some armor against this toxic diet and weight oriented culture. I encourage parents to teach their children about body acceptance and that all people come in different shapes and sizes. There are so many factors that affect body size and weight. No matter what the media says, it's the favorite shape of the day. And it does not change over the decades. History shows us all bodies are beautiful and miraculous. I encourage you to have developmentally appropriate conversations with your kids about how some bodies are mistreated in our culture, while some are unnecessarily favored. This may not stop any experiences of bullying or mistreatment at school. Still, it might help prevent them from internalizing that mistreatment and feeling like their bodies are wrong. If your kids are thin, you can also talk to them about their privilege and not being part of this weight stigma and discrimination. One study of kids who were bullied or teased because of their weight showed that kids would love more support from their weight. Sorry. Sorry. Kids would love more support from their parents. They need to feel that the adults who care about them think their bodies and selves are acceptable. This kind of support is tough to give if you yourself don't believe that all bodies are good bodies. Our popular culture sure doesn't promote this. If you don't feel good about your body or are constantly struggling with food and dieting, it can be so hard to wrap yourself around this mentality. If you say that all bodies are beautiful or neutral, your child will see you at war with your own size, which will eventually be confusing, which I hear this over and over again in the family stories of some of my clients. It's a generational crisis. Parents have often been victims of some of the same messages and bullying, and we are trying to interrupt the circle of our children. These children are watching. They're constantly watching what we do and what we talk about. I remember one of my clients finally stopped a long standing and dangerous purging behavior when she overheard her 9-year-old say, "Mom, eats ice cream too." She eats a lot of it and then throws up afterward. My client had no idea that her daughter was on to her as she does this eating disorder behavior in private. She was surprised and mortified to hear this. When she realized that her daughter could imitate her and thought about the damage of her heart, teeth, and esophagus, and never mind the social aspects of the behavior, she could see just how terrible and risky the behavior was in herself. So she stopped actually purging cold turkey, which is typically very hard to do, because she saw all too clearly the effect her own eating disorders was potentially having on her child's learning about food. She told her daughter that she had an eating disorder, was getting help for it, and that throwing up after eating is not normal and it's very unsafe, which is really good. Another sharing another client's story is that she noticed her 8-year-old daughter adopting some of her obsessive and quirky ways of eating meals. She was so surprised that she noticed, and she was trying to imitate her at such a young age. Still, another one told me that her young son was shocked to see his mom eating 2 waffles when she was working on normalizing her eating and allowing for more flexibility. She had no idea that her son was noticing that she ate and noting how different it was from his preference. So, if you're really struggling with letting go of diet behavior and focusing on your weight, there is always support available. Yes, some individuals have to settle into a larger body to find peace with food. This can be challenging in a culture that values thinness above all other body types right now. I promise you that letting go of thinness as an outcome will bring you so much more freedom and vitality over time. Instead, focus on lifestyle, food, movement, and health enhancing self-care choices if you indeed care about your health. Focus on pleasure and joy instead of finding fault in the body you have been given in this short life. Weight loss or gain, if one tends to be underweight when unbalanced, is sometimes a side effect. Still, it needs to be, a back burner goal, not at the expense of your physical or mental health and well-being. Suppose you focus on eating, moving, and relating in a balanced life and energy sustaining way. In this case, I believe your health and well-being will improve no matter your body shape. Many of my fellow nutrition and eating disorder colleagues have worked with thousands of clients in this non-weight focused health at every size way with much success. You deserve every treatment if you or your child has an eating disorder. Eating disorders run in families. Actually, research has shown that there is a genetic component as well as environmental factors that promote disordered eating. Eating disorders like anorexia nervosa, which is restrictive eating, and there is bulimia nervosa, which is binge or purge cycling, and there is the binge eating disorder, which is a binge eating without purging, which are prevalent and very destructive. Despite this emphasis and dialogue about restrictive eating disorders in our culture, and most common eating disorders is binge eating disorder. Most of my clients tend to fall into the category of eating disorder that we call OSFED. That is like OSFED is other specified feeding and eating disorders, and many have features or faces of all the different types. So one thing I must mention is if your son fears weight gain, your son or daughter, he or she may not feed himself well all day only to find himself eating frantically at night. If your daughter wishes to be thinner, she may make food choices about calories and not about her own body's wisdom and what it wants. Then she might feel unsatisfied and find herself looking for high-calorie foods later. This is the body's way of protecting itself from starvation. So by focusing on weight loss and body shape instead of balance and nourishment, teens may promote the weight gain they want to abolish. Oh, ironically, trying to lose weight, particularly when your body and brain are still growing, that is until about the age of 25. This can invite young people into a massive struggle with food and body. There are many ways in which a body size is not determined by how much food we eat. These include differences in metabolism, there is heredity, there is hormones, and some natural patterns of movement, and even something called epigenetics. Let me tell you about epigenetics, which is around weight. Is this how your parents and grandparents ate during you and your mother's conception may affect your tendency to be a particular body shape and size. Seriously. So, most interestingly, there's a study that was done on Dutch famine victims. Let me just quickly tell this short story about so that you can understand about epigenetics. So, the famine victims suffered, like the parents who conceived children during this time of starvation went on to have children who were significantly larger bodied than their siblings. It's as if these kids whose pregnant mothers didn't have enough to eat entered the world as caloric energy conservers, ready for famine. Then they grew up in a world where food was no longer insecure but abundantly available, and their genes couldn't adjust. So I sometimes wonder if this isn't one of those less discussed factors when we hear about the increased weight of each generation. Could it be that the dieting mothers and grandmothers inadvertently encourage the larger body size in their children that they're trying to avoid? Do they do, I don't know, do they do this by trying not to gain too much weight in pregnancy and limiting their eating behaviors that may be carried over from before they were pregnant? It's quite fascinating. Yeah, so if we humans don't get enough calories to meet biological needs, we don't drop dead, at least not right now or right away. The body simply does what it does more slowly. That's why many chronic restrictive dieters have irritable bowel and constipation on their problem list due to slower digestion. Yeah, so those with severe anorexia nervosa will have dangerously slow heart rates. Restrictive dieters' hair might get thinner, and women menstrual periods might stop, something like that. So when you or your child is not eating enough, the heartbeat keeps beating and the brain keeps functioning. The calories go to the vital body functions, but not to the not so vital ones, like the hair or infertility or keeping warm. Bye. Till next time.